Hello, my name is Brenton Harrison, and we're back today with our third video in our series on financial trends you see on social media. We've covered LLCs, we've covered tax deductions, we've covered how investing works in reality compared to how you see it discussed online. And we're here today to talk about two types of community investment vehicles called Blessing Looms and Susus. Let's get started. If you work in an industry like mine, where you're giving advice on things like investments or debt or loans, then it's highly likely that industry is really heavily regulated. And when it's heavily regulated, you can't just hop online and tell people what to do with their money. You might have to have a disclosure statement or a disclaimer or put your lending number at the bottom of your communications like everyone in home lending has to do. At the very least, your communications with the public are going to be monitored. There's going to be some back-end compliance officer somewhere who makes sure that if somebody sends you a message, that what you send back is reasonable advice because you're telling people stuff that has consequences. So when you see people online who are telling you that you can put a little bit of money into a blessing loom or rose, flower, whatever symbol they're using to make their illustration and get 8 times back what you put in, you should probably be a little concerned when there's no disclosure statement and no disclaimer. But that was exactly what was happening when looms hit the scene a couple years ago. A blessing loom is a concept where you have one person at the center of a group of people who is the recipient of all of the contributions that people at the outer ends of the group are making to start the rotation. Now, there are many different versions of this, but let's look at an example of a blessing loom where there's 8 people at the outside of the loom who are all starting with a $100 initial contribution that will benefit the person in the center. As you can see, the 8 contributors at the outer ring of the loom, they deposit their $100. And that $100 flows through the loom to the recipient at the center who gets the entire $800. So they're in the center, everybody on the outside put in 100, and the person at the center gets the entire contribution from the outer ring. Now, once their money's been received, they're going to move out of the purple center, and the 2 participants that you see here in pink will now move into a position as recipients of their own loom. But here's the problem. While there was only 1 participant who needed 8 contributors for the initial loom, there are now 2 new recipients who each need 8 new members apiece to generate their $800. Because if they don't find 8 new members, they're not going to get the same payout that the first person did. So everybody in pink, these 2 people that goes into the center, they now have to find 8 additional people to start a new loom. So in this next rotation, that's 16 members in total that must be added to the circle. Now, once these 2 recipients in pink have been the recipients of the loom and move on, there's going to be 4 new members at the center of their own looms. And each of those 4 are going to require 8 new contributors for a grand total of 32 new contributors. By the time you get to even 5 cycles of this blessing loom, you would need 256 new members to contribute $100 to make sure that the next round of recipients gets the same payout they were promised that the first recipient received of $800. But forget how unlikely it is that you would find 256 new people to put in $100 to make sure that everybody at the center of those looms gets their desired payout. Forget about all that because the very basic nature of looms is that they are illegal. They are a form of pyramid scheme. And if you don't believe me, believe the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, because the diagram that we just reviewed was released by the FTC as a warning to potential investors that this is a fraudulent investment activity. And if you think it's no big deal, hey, I'm just putting some money in a pot with some friends, nobody's going to make an issue out of this if it's found out that we're doing it, you'd be wrong because the FTC actually partnered with authorities in multiple states, starting with Arkansas, to arrest leaders of a chain letter scam that was actually a loom that was requiring people to put in $1,000 to start each rotation. And what's worse, when they put out their communications, they are clear that this is overwhelmingly targeted towards communities of color. They are going to people who in their mind are less likely to know that it's a scam, and they're asking them to put in their money knowing that mathematically, they're probably not going to get it back if they're on the wrong end of the rotation. So the next time somebody offers you a guaranteed 800% return, 800% return on your investment with no disclaimer and no disclosure statement, it probably actually is too good to be true. Now let's cover one that's not technically illegal, but in my mind is just as unlikely to work over a long period of time. and that is that Susus are an easy way to build wealth within a community. Susus came on the scene around the same time as giving looms, actually, and that actually caused people to confuse the two. You have a lot of people who describe a Susu as a loom and vice versa. One of them is illegal. A loom is illegal. A Susu is not illegal. It's just unlikely to work, in my opinion. A susu is also called a giving circle. And for lack of a better description, a giving circle is basically an informal lending network that you can set up between your friends, your families, your coworkers, et cetera, et cetera. So these susus are designed to put these people in a circle, whoever's involved in your group. And in the first month, everybody puts money into the pot, or the first week, however frequently your circle rotates. And for that first rotation, one person will be the recipient of the entire pot. All of the contributions will flow to them. And in the next rotation, the next person in the circle will be the recipient of the entire pot, and so on and so forth. And when the circle completes, every person involved should have been the recipient of 1 month or 1 week or 1 year's contributions. And they're designed to go on forever and ever. They're not supposed to stop. So let's look at an example of a giving circle, or a susu, where you have 4 friends who have all agreed to put in $200 a month. So in our example, the first month recipient puts in $200, just like everybody else in the circle, but they get back the entire $800 worth of contributions. In the next period, the person following them on the circle will do the same. They'll put in their money, but then they'll be the recipient of the entire pot, and the circle keeps on rotating. And that's how things work if the giving circle is running smoothly. Now, it's important to note that unlike the loom, a giving circle, it doesn't have an opportunity to increase your money. Like when you talk about a loom, people are saying, hey, you put in 100, you get 800 back. That's not how a giving circle works, because if the circle is actually completed, every person will have contributed 800, but they'll also have been the recipient of 800. So it's not that you're increasing your money. That's not where the magic comes. The magic, quote unquote, of the susu is that for everybody except the last person in the circle, there's going to be a month where you receive more funds than you've contributed at that point in time. So for example, what we're looking at right now, the first month recipient gets $800 after having only contributed $200. So for these participants, the giving circle is like an informal loan or a payday advance. They're getting more money back than they've put in, but the last member of the circle doesn't get an advance. If you're last in the circle, you're getting $800 back in the month that you've actually contributed your $800th. So for them, it's no different than actually contributing to a savings account and then just withdrawing the funds. My big problem with the giving circle is not the idea that you're building money with other people. In a perfect world, I would love to build money with other people and know that it could work. The problem is that you're asking all of these people in a group to depend on other people in the circle to accomplish one of the most difficult financial tasks that a person can accomplish. And that task is saving the same amount of money every single month with no exceptions. And in a perfect world, that's what makes Susu so attractive in the first place, right? They're building on the concept of Ujamaa, cooperative economics, the idea that we can band together and at some point in time give a cash infusion to a member of our community who can use it to advance themselves financially. But in order for it to work, everybody has to save the exact same amount of money. And statistics show that it is actually shockingly hard for one family to do that, let alone a group of families trying to do it together. So a few years ago, there was a Deloitte study that was released that analyzed saving trends from US families dating back from 1985 going all the way up to 2017. And from that time period, the average US savings rate for a family actually seems pretty strong at just under 10%. When you dig into the numbers, you find that within those percentiles, where the average American is saving under 10%, if you actually look at people who are in the lower 40% relative to household income, they had a negative savings rate. They spend more than they make, and they've done that for the past 30 years. And what's worse, even if you go up and you say, all right, the lower 40 percentile have a negative savings rate, but what about from 41% to 60%? They have a negative savings rate as well, and that didn't change until the 2000s. And I guarantee you that's not because they choose to live that way, right? Many of those people are probably trying to save, and it's really difficult to do so when you're dealing with low income, societal pressures, policy working against you, and you're trying to get out of that hole. So maybe you're thinking, all right, well, what if we go up in income? Maybe it'll be a little bit better. What is it from the 41st percentile to the 60th percentile of household income? For them, for the overwhelming majority of the periods from 1985 to 2017, they also had a negative savings rate, and that didn't change until the 2000s, which means that the only group in America that has been saving consistently, not a lot, saving period, and doing it consistently are people who are in the top 40% of income. And these are the people who are statistically less likely to be attracted to the concept of a giving circle. So let's go back to our example and see what happens if in the fourth month, one participant, just one, can't afford to contribute their $200. The fourth participant in the circle has contributed $800 in total, but now because one person had a rough month, then couldn't put in their $200, the last person in the circle put in $800, but only gets $600 for their rotation. And the person who was unable to contribute, it might have been a very valid reason. They could have needed new tires or to pay for registration for their children's schooling or some other unexpected life event. But regardless of the reason, even 1 month where life happens to one of your members in the circle means that someone gets the short end of the stick. I do think a giving circle could work well if it's in a really close-knit community that's doing it, and the amount that you have to save per rotation is low enough that there's a very, very high probability that everyone involved would be able to contribute no matter what. To me, the risk when you have the amounts that are being saved go higher and higher is too great to have yourself putting money into a collective pot with other people and depending on everyone, including yourself, to accomplish consistent savings. That's it. We're going trend by trend through these social media topics that you see online. And I'm hoping that one or two of these is resonating with you, right? Like there's some stuff that you might not have seen at all. And there may be some other topics we've covered that you're seeing every single time you log online. So hopefully, again, you're getting some context and some clarity as to what is actually worth holding on to when it comes to stuff you see on accounts that you follow. So this was our third video. And in next week's video, the fourth in the series, we're going to talk about a concept of building credit for your children. You see people talking about getting credit in your children's name and what it allows them to do when they're 18 or 21 or on their own. And in next week's video, we're going to talk about how realistic that is. And if it's realistic, how you can use it to your child's benefit. See you then.